Every human life, at some point, walks through the fire of struggle. It's not a question of if, but when the storm will come. Pain does not discriminate. It touches the strong and the fragile, the young and the old, the dreamers and the doubters alike. Yet, somewhere hidden in that pain lies a strange paradox. What hurts us also has the power to heal us. What breaks us can, in time, build us into something far greater than we imagined. To live is to experience loss, heartbreak, failure, fear, and disappointment. But it is also to rise, to rebuild, and to rediscover one's inner strength. Every story of greatness, every tale of triumph, carries the fingerprints of pain. It is the quiet teacher in the shadows, the sculptor shaping our souls through the chisel of experience. Pain, though cruel and uninvited, is often the beginning of purpose. It is the catalyst that awakens us to who we really are. When we suffer, the illusions fall away. We are forced to confront ourselves, not the self we pretend to be, but the self that remains when everything else is stripped bare. This is not a story of avoiding struggle, but of embracing it, because in that embrace lies the seed of transformation. The journey from pain to purpose is not a straight road. It is a spiral, looping through loss and revelation, through despair and discovery, until one day, we find that the very things that once made us ache have become the source of our deepest wisdom. Pain is life's most universal language. It speaks without words, crossing boundaries of culture, age, and identity. It is the silent cry of a broken heart, the weight of unfulfilled dreams, the ache of rejection, and the sting of failure. Yet beneath all its forms, pain carries the same message. Something within us is calling for change. In its rawest form, pain is an alarm bell. It tells us when something isn't right, when we're out of alignment with truth, when we're living below our potential, or when we've been ignoring our deepest needs. But unlike physical pain, emotional or spiritual pain can linger quietly, shaping our choices and beliefs in ways we don't always recognize. Some people spend their lives running from pain, masking it with distractions, work, entertainment, relationships, or addictions, only to find that it returns stronger and more insistent. Others choose to sit with it, to listen to what it has to say. Those who dare to face their pain head-on are often the ones who discover purpose on the other side. Philosophers and poets have long pondered the role of suffering in human evolution. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, echoed this sentiment in man's search for meaning, describing how even in the darkest circumstances, those who found meaning were able to endure. Pain, then, is not merely a punishment or a misfortune. It is a mirror. It shows us what we care about most, what we value deeply, and where our greatest growth lies. When we learn to look into that mirror with courage, we stop asking, "Why me?" and begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" There comes a time in every person's life when the weight of struggle feels too heavy to carry. It may arrive as a devastating loss, an illness, a betrayal, or a dream that crumbles before our eyes. These are the moments that shatter our illusions of control, the nights when we cry out to the heavens and hear no answer. At the breaking point, everything feels meaningless. The world, once vibrant, fades into shades of gray. We question our worth, our purpose, even the fairness of existence itself. For many, this is where hope dies. But for some, something extraordinary begins to stir beneath the rubble of despair. A quiet voice that whispers, "There's more to you than this." This is the birthplace of transformation. When we are stripped of everything we thought defined us, our titles, relationships, possessions, and plans, we are left face to face with the core of who we are. And it is in that vulnerable place that growth begins. Consider the story of Malala Yousafzai, the young Pakistani girl who was shot by the Taliban simply for wanting an education. Her pain could have silenced her forever. Instead, she turned it into a global movement for girls' rights. Or think of Nelson Mandela, who endured 27 years of imprisonment and emerged not with hatred, but with forgiveness and vision. Their struggles did not destroy them. They refined them. The breaking point is not the end. It is the threshold. It is where old versions of us die so that new ones can emerge. Like a seed that must crack open to grow, we too must sometimes be broken to become whole. The turning point often comes quietly. There is rarely a flash of lightning or a booming voice announcing redemption. Instead, it begins with something small, a spark of awareness, a single moment of courage, or a whisper of hope that says, "Keep going." For many, this moment arises not when the pain has disappeared, but when it is finally faced without resistance. Acceptance, not in the sense of giving up, but in acknowledging what is, becomes the doorway to healing. When we stop fighting against what hurts, we make space for transformation to begin. Philosopher Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Those words are not metaphor alone. They hold psychological truth. Every emotional wound creates an opening, a vulnerability that allows compassion, empathy, and depth to grow. The very parts of us that have been hurt often become the sources of our greatest gifts. Think of the addict who, after years of self-destruction, becomes a counselor for others fighting the same demons. Or the survivor of loss who turns grief into advocacy, creating support groups for those left behind. Meaning transforms pain from something senseless into something sacred. The moment we begin to see that our suffering can serve a purpose greater than itself, pain loses its power to paralyze. Instead, it becomes fuel, not for bitterness but for creation. This is the alchemy of the human spirit, the ability to turn ashes into gold, wounds into wisdom, and trials into triumphs. Every life touched by pain carries within it the potential for transformation. The stories of those who have walked through the valley of suffering and emerged stronger are not simply tales of endurance. They are reminders that growth is possible for all of us. Oprah's childhood was scarred by poverty and abuse, experiences that could have easily defined her life through pain. But she chose another path, one of purpose. Through her vulnerability and honesty, she built a career empowering others to speak their truth. Her story reminds us that even the deepest wounds can become a platform for healing, not only for oneself, but for millions of others. Viktor Frankl, meaning amid madness. In the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, Viktor Frankl witnessed unimaginable suffering. He lost his family, his freedom, and nearly his life. Yet from that darkness emerged one of the most profound insights in modern psychology, that humans can endure anyhow if they have a why. His philosophy of logotherapy, the search for meaning, became a cornerstone for countless people rebuilding their lives after trauma. Bethany Hamilton, resilience after loss. At just 13 years old, surfer Bethany Hamilton lost her arm in a shark attack. For many, that would have ended a dream. But Bethany's determination and faith propelled her back into the ocean. She returned to professional surfing, not in spite of her loss, but because of the strength it awakened within her. Her journey symbolizes the power of purpose-driven perseverance, a living testament that pain can propel us to redefine what's possible. Nelson Mandela, forgiveness as freedom. Mandela's 27 years in prison could have filled him with bitterness, yet he emerged preaching forgiveness and unity. His pain gave birth to a purpose that transcended personal suffering. It became a vision of reconciliation for an entire nation. In forgiving those who wronged him, Mandela found his freedom long before his physical release. But transformation isn't only for public figures. Every day, ordinary people rise from extraordinary pain, a parent rebuilding after loss, a survivor choosing to help others heal, someone starting anew after heartbreak. The human spirit, when aligned with purpose, is unstoppable. These unseen stories remind us that transformation doesn't require fame. It requires faith. Each of these examples holds a common thread. Pain became the teacher, not the jailer. Through struggle, they found clarity. Through adversity, they found purpose. In recent decades, psychologists have begun to study what ancient wisdom has long taught: that struggle is not merely a source of trauma, it is also a powerful catalyst for growth. The term post-traumatic growth, PTG, introduced by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, describes the positive psychological change that can occur after experiencing major adversity. Unlike resilience, the ability to bounce back, post-traumatic growth is about transformation. It's not about returning to who you were before, but becoming someone entirely new because of what you've been through. Research identifies 5 key areas of growth: greater appreciation of life, deeper relationships and empathy, increased personal strength, spiritual or existential awakening, new possibilities and life paths. This aligns with what spiritual traditions have taught for millennia. Pain shakes our foundations, forcing us to rebuild, but often what we rebuild is stronger, wiser, and truer than what was lost. Neurologically, struggle also changes the brain. When we face adversity, the brain's stress systems activate, but so do the pathways of adaptation. Over time, these pathways build psychological flexibility, enhancing our ability to navigate future challenges. Growth is a biological response to survival. Pain pushes us to evolve physically, mentally, and spiritually. It expands our capacity to love, to empathize, and to lead. But science alone cannot explain the mystery of transformation. There's something deeper, an invisible thread that connects human suffering to spiritual awakening. Pain, when honored rather than resisted, opens us to compassion, humility, and a deeper understanding of life itself. When pain finds purpose, it becomes redemption. Every scar we carry tells a story, not of defeat, but of endurance. It is the mark of having survived, learned, and risen again. Exemption doesn't erase what happened. It reclaims it. It transforms the wound from something that once held us down into something that now lifts others up. Pain without purpose is suffering. Pain with purpose becomes strength. The act of giving meaning to our struggle, of saying this was not wasted, is one of the most profound forms of healing available to us as human beings. Consider again Viktor Frankl's insight that those who survived the concentration camps did not necessarily do so because they were physically stronger, but because they had found a reason to endure. Some wanted to see their families again. Some wanted to finish their life's work. Some simply wanted to bear witness to the truth of what they experienced. That meaning gave their pain shape, a direction to flow rather than a weight to sink under. When we channel our pain toward purpose, it becomes creative energy. It inspires art, activism, invention, and compassion. History is filled with examples. Maya Angelou, who transformed the trauma of racism and abuse into poetry that liberated others. Frida Kahlo, who painted her suffering onto canvases that spoke of beauty in brokenness. Martin Luther King Jr., whose experience of injustice gave birth to a movement grounded in love and courage. Their pain was not the end of their story. It was the ink that wrote their legacy. But you don't have to be famous to live this truth. Each of us can use what hurt us to help others heal. A person who once felt invisible can become a light for those who feel unseen. A heart once broken can become a safe place for others to rest. Even the smallest act of kindness, born from understanding, can ripple outward in ways we may never see. This is redemption, not the denial of pain, but the transformation of it. When we take what tried to destroy us and use it to create something meaningful, we reclaim our power. Pain grants us something precious, perspective. It strips away illusions and forces us to see what truly matters. After suffering, the trivial no longer holds power. The petty arguments, the shallow comparisons, the endless chasing of approval, they fade into insignificance. People who have suffered deeply often speak with a certain groundedness. They know that joy is not the absence of pain, but the presence of gratitude. They have learned that life's beauty is fleeting and therefore sacred. They love harder, forgive faster, and speak truth more freely because they know how fragile everything can be. Perspective also helps us recognize that pain connects us more than it separates us. Everyone carries their invisible battles. When we understand that, compassion replaces judgment. We stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "How can I use this to understand others better?" This shift from self-pity to empathy is the essence of transformation. It turns personal suffering into shared humanity. To live with purpose after pain is not to pretend that everything is fine. It is to live awake. It is to carry our scars not as chains, but as symbols of who we've become. Purpose does not always appear as a grand mission or a world-changing cause. Sometimes it's as simple as living with authenticity, being kind when it would be easier not to, speaking truth when silence feels safer, choosing love over bitterness. Purpose often begins in the quiet moments when we decide that our story matters, that our survival means something. Living with purpose also means embracing the ongoing nature of growth. Healing is not linear. There will be days when old wounds ache, when doubts return, when darkness whispers again. But living with purpose means we don't let those moments define us. We let them remind us how far we've come. Each act of courage, every time we face the day despite fear, every time we extend grace instead of resentment, is an affirmation of life. Purpose is not the absence of struggle. It's the decision to keep walking through it with meaning. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, highlighting the cracks rather than hiding them. The result is something more beautiful than the original, not despite its brokenness, but because of it. That's what living with purpose looks like. We are the vessels, our cracks filled with the gold of experience and compassion. Our imperfections become our art. When we transform our pain into purpose, we often find ourselves drawn toward service. True healing reaches its fullness when what once hurt us becomes a source of healing for others. A person who has overcome addiction might guide others toward recovery. Someone who has survived grief might comfort those just beginning that painful journey. In serving others, we find that our wounds have become wellsprings. What once isolated us now connects us to the greater whole of humanity. There's a quiet grace in this. Service turns pain outward into love. It prevents bitterness from taking root. It transforms memory into movement. And perhaps this is the deepest meaning of all, that our pain, when redeemed through purpose, doesn't just change our own lives, it changes the world around us. Every culture, every faith, and every generation tells a version of the same story. The story of death and rebirth, of loss and renewal, of fire and flight. The ancient Greeks told of the phoenix, a radiant bird that, when consumed by flame, would rise anew from its own ashes, not weakened, but transformed. It is a metaphor that captures the essence of human resilience. Like the phoenix, we too are called to burn, not in destruction, but in purification. Pain strips away the unnecessary, leaving behind only what is true. The ashes of our old selves become the soil from which purpose grows. When we emerge from life's fires, we are never quite the same. The person who walks out of heartbreak is not the same one who fell in love. The one who survives loss does not see life with the same eyes. Pain changes us, but if we allow it, it changes us for the better. It can awaken courage, deepen empathy, and ignite a clarity that nothing else can teach. The phoenix within us does not rise because it avoids the fire. It rises because it endures it. That is the secret of transformation. We do not transcend our suffering by denying it. We transcend it by living through it fully, by letting it carve us open so that new light can enter. Beyond psychology and philosophy lies something even deeper, the spiritual meaning of pain. Every soul, at its core, yearns to grow, to awaken, to remember who it truly is. Pain often becomes the language through which that awakening happens. When life is comfortable, we rarely question, we rarely seek. But when comfort is taken from us, we begin to ask the sacred questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What truly matters? Pain calls us back to the present moment. It humbles us, softens us, and opens our hearts. In the silence that follows suffering, we often encounter something divine, a presence that whispers of connection, of grace, of purpose beyond comprehension. Those who have walked through deep suffering often speak of a strange peace that emerges afterward. Not the shallow happiness of circumstances, but the quiet joy of knowing they can endure, love, and give meaning to even the hardest of experiences. In that sense, pain becomes holy. It strips away what is false so that truth may remain. It humbles the ego and awakens the soul. It is not a punishment. It is an initiation, a sacred passage through which we become more whole. The final stage of transformation is integration, learning not just to survive pain, but to weave it into the fabric of our identity. This is when the story becomes complete. To integrate pain means to honor it, to see it not as an intruder, but as a teacher. It means we no longer define ourselves by what happened to us, but by what grew from us. When we integrate our struggles, we become storytellers instead of victims. We can speak our truth without shame, because we understand that our wounds are not signs of weakness. They are symbols of having lived deeply. And when we share those stories, something miraculous happens. Our pain becomes a bridge. It connects us to others, giving them permission to heal, to feel, and to hope. What once isolated us now unites us. The great paradox of life is that the moments that break us often lead us to the people and places that complete us. Our stories, the messy, painful, beautiful ones, are what make us human. Growth is not a destination. It's a continuous unfolding. Even when we think we've healed, life will test us again, not to break us, but to show us how far we've come. Every new challenge offers a chance to revisit what we've learned, to apply our wisdom in deeper ways. Pain will always exist in some form, but so will the potential for meaning. That is the eternal dance, suffering and awakening, falling and rising, losing and finding. The goal is not to eliminate struggle, but to evolve through it consciously. Each cycle of pain and renewal brings us closer to our authentic selves, to our highest purpose. When we accept this rhythm, life becomes less about resistance and more about surrender, not a passive surrender, but a trusting one. We begin to see pain not as the enemy, but as a companion guiding us toward growth. When people transform their pain into purpose, their lives become living proof of hope. Their presence itself becomes a light. A child who grew up in chaos becomes a teacher of peace. A person who faced rejection becomes a voice of inclusion. A survivor of despair becomes a messenger of hope. These are not just stories of survival. They're stories of transcendence. Each one reminds us that pain, when honored and transformed, becomes the raw material of greatness. The legacy of a healed person extends far beyond their lifetime. Every act of kindness, every moment of compassion born from struggle, ripples outward through generations. That is how pain becomes purpose, and purpose becomes legacy. So, what does it truly mean to go from pain to purpose? It means allowing the fire to shape you without letting it consume you. It means trusting that every heartbreak, every failure, every loss carries within it the seed of transformation. It means knowing that your struggle is not a detour. It is the path. The very things that wounded you are the same things that can awaken your strength, deepen your empathy, and clarify your mission. To walk this path is to understand that life's greatest beauty often grows from its greatest sorrow. The lotus blooms from the mud. The diamond is forged under pressure. The phoenix rises from ashes. And we, too, are made radiant by our scars. When you look back on your life, on the nights you thought would break you, on the days you thought you couldn't survive, you'll see that those were the moments when your soul was being sculpted into something magnificent. Pain is not the opposite of purpose. It is its birthplace. Remember, every challenge you face isn't meant to break you, but to build you. The journey from pain to purpose is never easy, But it's in those moments of struggle that we find our strength, our resilience, and ultimately, our transformation. Keep going. Your growth story is still being written. So when struggle comes, don't ask, why me? Ask instead, what is this shaping me to become? Because one day, you will look at your scars not with shame, but with gratitude, knowing they were the proof that you were being transformed. And in that moment, you will understand the sacred truth at the heart of every human journey, that from pain comes purpose, from struggle comes strength, and from the ashes we rise.